When you're going up to, E flat, you got to find a way to sing that note comfortably and without distortion. And a lot of singers, when they're first getting started, because their idea of distortion or just rock singing in general comes from weight and heaviness and power, and they're oftentimes trying to push and force their way, so they avoid all these silly sounds or these lighter sounds that really set up the scream to be what it's going to be. So practice making those sounds first without constraint, without any difficulty. Don't avoid head voice. I know head voice isn't the coolest thing to practice, but if you can't hit that note with a you have no chance of being able to actually distort it.
This is an interesting one. As he said, he has a mixed voice issue. So he's, when it comes to grit and distortion. So going up higher, his distortion goes away. He's tried constricting more, compressing more, adding throttle, experimenting with placement, and nothing's worked. He just can't seem to get what he was calling a harsh distortion from the band Wasp, which I heard more as a epiglottic distortion. But regardless, he's trying to sound distorted up around his second bridge. And he can do it in his chest voice. He can't do it up high. What do we do with that? I already answered him. I gave some pretty lengthy answers to a couple of his questions. But I see distortion up high being more thinned out. You have to get a little bit lighter. You have to cry into it more, not try harder, definitely not push harder. And I'd say that regardless of going up higher, if you're crying, you're thinning, you're adding a slight constricted to your voice instead of just trying to constrict more, trying to push more, trying to compress more, that's not going to give you the distortion you're wanting. Mm-hmm. Go up high, lighten up, hey! And then overcry it. And then if that's not harsh enough, hey! Go up. Hey! Now it's harsh again. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's more my answer to it. What do you guys have to say about that? Like singing with distortion up high, just not really working for somebody. What would you look at? What would you instruct them in?
Oh, so we both took a breath at the same time. Well, going off of what you were saying, man, I absolutely agree. I think that a lot of the issues with distortion lie in our perception of what it's supposed to feel like based on what it sounds like. And of course, it sounds like we're putting an exuberant amount of compression into our sound to make it happen. But when you're going up high and you're adding all that extra compression, you're just stressing out the vocal folds. You're causing them to constrict more rather than loosening up and just allowing that sound. At the end of the day, distortion there's a lot of air behind the distortion that's just allowing it to happen. And when you can add the thinness of your mixed voice with that sound without adding that pressure, you just got to get out of your own way. Stop insisting on making it harsh and intense and go off of the feeling of loosening everything up, allowing the voice to feel distorted up there rather than pushing it into that constricted area.
That's a great answer. That's a great answer. I would also say, when you go up higher, so down low, your vocal cords are loose. So it makes sense to go, hey, yeah, and go forward and compress more into it because, you're getting better closure. Exactly. So up high, just because the nature of the pitch, your vocal cords are taut. Mm-hmm. The muscles are more taut. They're more involved. Going, hey! You're already getting more compression. So the idea of getting distortion with that means, you got to let some air through, not compress more. So it's not about pushing more because now you're just going to be going, that's all you're going to get. But if you thin it out more and you allow it to bleed a little air, it works. So do you have anything to add, Drew?
Yeah, I want to kind of go off of that idea of the lightness of it, because when you're allowing yourself up high to have good closure and coordination on the pitch, just enough that you can hit it, just being able to have good, clean sound in it. If you want to keep it, more clean as you're going up even higher, you add the compression because you're trying to keep intense closure to be able to have it just whistle through essentially as you get up really high. But as you're inducing and using the distortion, it's the introduction of the air that actually allows you to get to it. Hey, hey! I'm just using the muscles to allow a little opening in the back to allow it to shoot up, and then thus add the distortion through the added false folds that the air allows to start moving. And you can control that to varying degrees through using some compression, but you don't want to be full into it like you're down low. Hey! You want to let go of that feeling and be more Chris Cornell, more light and decompressed, and use that throttle, if you want to call it that, for your compression to balance into it if you would like. And you can use twang to your advantage as well to keep it forward and then keep some of that sound
the balance.
down low.
The balance into it is a cool idea because so many people push for more distortion, and it's actually just about supporting the shape you're trying to make. So distortion being a shape first, that gives you that sound, a certain setup that gives you that sound, and then you're supporting keeping that setup. I was about to say, like going up above A sharp, where you're getting more into like even C. Yay! It's even lighter.
Yes.
Like your singing voice is going, hey! It's not a belt. If you tried to belt that and then add distortion, until you probably already maxed out your push around A sharp or B4. Up to the C, you better be backing off. It's a mix. And the higher you go, the more of a mix it is. To the point that I even got to where the really high screams, like, yay! Yay! I started teaching instead of grit, yay! Like where it's like really hard to get into. I started teaching it more as a scream first and then over cry it to get the mixed voice back in. Because it's much easier to do it that way. Because the scream is in head voice. And then you're doing this, you're over crying to add more weight and more closure and getting more of a resonance out of it. That's a terrible example. But the where it's just and then over cry it to make it thicker, that's so much easier than starting out thick and trying to force a distortion through.
Exactly. Yeah. When you're up higher where you finally have the mix, first, obviously work on the mix to have that coordination that you need to then start adding the distortion so that, because it all really is just a filter. It's something you're adding on top of the singing voice.
Yay! Yay!
Yeah.
That's another thing about Chris Cornell's voice that I had to learn because I had a student who wanted to sing just like him. And, took me like 45 minutes just to get into the right placement to sound like him. The acoustics are one thing. This, it's kind of a yawl a little bit. It's more like what I call a gospel placement. It's like neutral, slightly curving, slightly back. But when he distorted, it was not because he was forcing it. It's because he was so thin when he sang up high that adding any extra accent or any extra throttle to what he was doing immediately distorted. Like there's no other way to do it. So going, just that little bit of extra because I'm already really thin. It started distorting. Or when he went really high, what is it? Like that's totally. I'm super thin right now. But when I try to stabilize that, it's because I'm thin. I'm not constricting extra. I'm not compressing anymore. I'm not pointing it forward because that's not at all the placement he's in. I'm just thin. I think you hear that with singers like Maria Brink when she would go up super high. It just distorts. I don't think she's necessarily trying to scream, like forcing a scream. I think it's just what happens. I would think it'd be harder for her because of the position she's in with her voice, how thin she is. It'd be harder for her to sing clean.
But yeah, like going up even higher where it like where you're having the good closure and it's super light, it feels easier to distort because you're not holding on so much to that tension to keep the coordination up top, where it's really that balance of the CTs and the TAs to keep like it forward and sounding like it's not completely air, but then letting go, the air will just naturally seep through. And if you keep that balance intact, it will just distort. But like, I'll see if I can give an example. Like it will, that's just trying to be closed off as much as possible. But like that will just distort up top there. But before it, you can still have the closure that you want. But if I stay light and relaxed like I need to be to hit the note and still coordinated, going up any higher will just distort naturally. Even though it's still light, it's the only thing I can really do to keep the closure without making my muscles do too much work.
Yeah. And I think you feel it when they do too much work. For
yes.
Sure.
So just let your voice crack and like just fall apart is better than straining and feeling it grinding.
Real quick, I want to let you know about our Rock Singing Success community. If you want a place to discuss this topic further or other topics, a place where you can improve your voice and your music career with courses and other resources, and even have a community of like-minded singers in rock and metal that are on the same path, those that support each other, encourage each other along the way, then join us at school.com/rocksingingsuccess. And that's SKOOL.com/rocksingingsuccess. But what about a harsh distortion? Because if we're on like A sharp, hey! My answer to that is usually, okay, you have a couple choices there. You can go or mix, which is not that harsh. Or you can go into a belt, think Lane Staley, Chris Motionless, where I'm loud, but I'm up here. And this is not above your second bridge. You're not getting into that area where you have to back off. It's like I am parachuting open in the crown of my head. So that's making it harsher. But I want to bring that up because even up there, you have so many choices. Yeah. Which is like, it's harsh because I'm belty and I'm lifting it off my throat so it doesn't grind. But it's this really harsh sound. I can back off and then try to still lift it straight up, try to bring it to the crown. And I get a little bit more of a compressed sound out of it, so it is harsher. But to me, that's a shouty type of distortion. Where I think you could also do, like in Wasp, going more into the epiglottal distortion. Most people don't know what that means, but again, epiglottal distortion is like you're in this position where you're more in like somewhere between Kermit the Frog and Marvin the Martian. And then you try to amp that up. Hey! You get a blues growl. Hey! You're getting Louis Armstrong. That's a trees of green. It's totally what you're getting at. And that's a very different distortion than the others we've been talking about. It's not bleeding air. It's not even about the airflow. It's about the position of your epiglottis, the flap that closes when you swallow. Hey! And I'm in this position where I already have a narrow epiglottis. Then I add to it. Hey! That's the sound I get.
Yeah, and you feel it lift too when you induce that idea of like swallowing. Just
everything kind of narrows down.
And in that voice too.
In that voice too, you can feel it's a little bit harder to push air through.
Where's the kaboom? Anyway, that's
and I think you brought up we're bringing up a rather important approach without saying it is because every time we just demonstrate each of these screams, we're finding it first in its natural phonating space, which is either like we were talking about mix, creating the sound without the distortion. So for that one, you have to find the space right here, and you have to figure out how to make that sound as comfortably as possible. So if the natural phonation is uncomfortable, then the scream isn't going to make it any better. If I'm really trying to compress to make this sound.
Oh yeah.
Then
don't do that, man.
Yeah. I'm not doing it anymore. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. versus I can't do it now. See, I screwed myself up. But
I used to do that all the time when I first started teaching. It's like, here's how you do it wrong. Like, why did I do that? Now I can't sing.
I used to do that too, and I just did it now. I haven't learned. But and so like, or for the talking about in the mix, when you're going up to you guys are singing an E flat a bunch, you got to find a way to sing that note comfortably and without distortion. And a lot of singers, when they're first getting started, because their idea of distortion or just rock singing in general comes from weight and heaviness and power, and they're oftentimes trying to push and force their way, so they avoid all these silly sounds or these lighter sounds that really set up the scream to be what it's going to be. So
yes,
practice making those sounds first without constraint, without any difficulty. Don't avoid head voice. I know head voice isn't the coolest thing to practice, but if you can't hit that note with a you have no chance of being able to actually distort it.
There's something really profound you just said there that I want to make sure gets driven home in people's heads. Distortion's an effect. So you're adding on top of your voice. If you can't sing the pitch, you're not going to be able to distort it comfortably. You're not, because you don't have control over it. You're not balanced already. If you can sing the pitch and you're comfortable and you're already relaxed, manipulating the voice a little bit more is way easier than forcing it to happen. If you're already forcing a pitch, then you're going to force the distortion too. And it's not going to last. You're going to wear yourself down. That actually makes me think about something else concerning distortion, but I think this goes for clean singing as well. Another question by the same person. Talking about more oversinging, how you speed up recovery. So I'll briefly go over what he said, and then we'll talk about it. But basically saying, let's say you committed to singing 2 or 3 songs for people on a Friday night, but on Wednesday you got over enthusiastic and practiced for way longer than you needed to. And he's really talking about the distortion here. So he's talking about his voice was really hoarse afterwards. The false folds felt really irritated and swollen. So not even sure if you should do a straw phonation. It's the way you put it, or any semi-occluded to help recover, or other rehab techniques, because it hurts. So, but you got 2 days before you're going to be on stage singing. What do? How do you recover? Said normally it would take him 4 days to recover from that. He has 2. What do y'all think?
I think where I find myself a lot of the time when I'm trying to recover as quickly as possible is, even though it's distorting, if you're singing it, doing what you can to vocalize and stay comfortable. And over time, and checking multiple times throughout the day, you want to give yourself little checkpoints of okay, I'm doing light phonation, drinking some herbal tea, resting as much as you can, not smoking, not drinking caffeine if you can avoid it, and getting to a point where you're starting to do little checkpoints throughout the day of, say, through the straw, or just even light phonations of anything like that can be useful, because even if it's it might 30 minutes later be where it's a little bit less, and then maybe the next day it slowly comes back, and it gives you a confidence boost to continue the good habits that you're doing to heal your voice, and commit to that, and giving yourself okay, I have maybe this much time I can start recovering, or, oh, cool, 30 minutes later, I'm able to start doing a little bit more of my routine to really get them back into shape. And constant checkpoints allow you to be really efficient with your recovery.
Yeah.
That's solid.
Yeah. What I really like about that approach is the fact that you're emphasizing go, and maybe I missed the mark, but you go about a little slower, pay more attention, that lighter phonation to kind of build yourself back up. I oftentimes think, I learned this the way to put it during my summer travels, and one of my instructors brought up the idea of vocal capital, where every day you wake up and you have a certain amount of voice for that day that you can use. And the more you train, the more you build up that vocal capital, and you're able to do more and more and more and more and more. And basically just stamina, but we want to call it something fancy because we're singers. So, but using that, thank you for the pity laugh. I appreciate it. You did a little thing where you went, oh, he made a joke, let me laugh at it.
No, it was funny. It took me a second to catch on, but it was funny.
No, you're good. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so this idea of vocal capital. So when you oversing, you're putting yourself, you want to think of it financially, like you're putting yourself in debt for the next day. You've pushed yourself, your voice is saying, I need time. we need to stop for a moment. And I'm not saying stop singing altogether, but take it one step at a time. Practice even just making a sound. If you really feel like this is hurting, then no amount of warm up, push, not no amount, but no amount of extreme exercises are actually going to make it better. What's going to make it better is rest and recovery. So if you only have 2 days, spend the first day shutting up and just let it reset. The next day, if it's not at 100%, chances are if you didn't, go overboard the following day after recovery or for recovery, then the next day after that, so the second day of this, you should be able to, you might not sound as good as you would want to originally, but you might be able to play around with the acoustics of the sound you're trying to make to at least get something that's going to be passable. That's going to say, he's, they sound great. They might not sound as good as they would have if they hadn't oversung, but then let that be a lesson for you as you go forward to say, okay, well, I oversung, I had a performance on Friday. Maybe, the next time we have something like that, I don't push it that hard, Yeah,
that's solid.
Just doing the show anyway.
I think everybody would say, shut up, be quiet. Don't do anything for a day, at least that long. So vocal rest for a day, for sure. And after that, very, very light phonations. I like to use the straw because it's meant for vocal recovery. But even then, it's light, because if you go for more than 10 minutes in a straw at full volume, you're done. Go light. Slowly build back up your voice. And I would also say, okay, you've got 2 days. So that's second day where you have a performance that night and you don't feel fully recovered, then you probably should change the way you're singing. I'm reminded a lot of Disturbed on tour, coming through Denver, and the first 2 nights of their tour in general were solid. Everything's distorted. Hey, come on, get up, get down. It's like, it's all distorted. And every show after that on the tour was perfectly clean. When they came through Denver, it was clean. It was weird. Come on, get up, get down with it. You're like, what? What? That is not how that song goes. But he was saved his voice. And it's okay to do that, because the main thing people are there for is the energy, to have fun. And if you want to be aggressive, okay, over-articulate your words. That'll make you aggressive. You don't need the distortion to sound aggressive. You don't need to push to sound aggressive. Just over-articulate, then you're going to sound aggressive. Change it. Don't distort. Keep the energy up. Mm-hmm. Keep the aggression up. Keep the crowd involvement up, and everybody will go home happy, even if you sing every note clean. That's what they're there for.
Right.
I want to address something in this very specifically, though. Okay. So you had a show Friday night, and Wednesday you practiced distortion for 2.5 hours just to try to get it right, to make sure you had the right technique. Don't do that. It's not worth it. As soon as you start to feel fatigue in your false chords, as soon as you start to feel like, okay, those are starting to get warm and irritated, hey, I need to start watching out. I need to be a little bit more careful now. That's what you should watch out for with distortion. And then as soon as you feel like this is getting harder to do, that means you're losing coordination. It's just going to get harder from there, and you're going to end up grinding a lot more often. So chill, take a break, take a long break until that feeling goes away and you have your voice back. Then go for it again. But if you feel hoarse afterwards, you're pushing, you're forcing, you're making your voice distort in ways it doesn't want to, ways it's not meant to. So yeah, you're going to destroy your voice to keep that up. So if you want distortion, don't force it, especially for 2.5 hours. But if you really want distortion, learn that shape that you were forcing to happen and see how light you can do it before it doesn't sound the way you want it to anymore. Keep working on getting that lighter and lighter, more relaxed, more comfortable until it gets to a point it's like, this is comfortable to do and I like it sound. That's good. That's as light as I need to be able to do it. But as long as you're forcing it, all you're doing is forcing a shape to happen. And I know people have heard me say that in so many recordings. It's a shape. Belting's a shape. Distortion's a shape. It's a shape first and foremost, and you're supporting that shape to stay that way so it makes the sound you want. You are not forcing the shape to happen. And I would say the biggest thing I would do, because you're not going to fully recover in those 2 days, if from oversinging distortion for 2.5 hours and being hoarse and being irritated in the throat and stuff, you're not going to recover in 2 days. So change the set, be okay singing it clean, and then cry like crazy, because that's probably the only way you're going to make it through singing all of that. Do this the whole time you're singing, and you'll probably get through it. You might not have a voice afterwards, but you wouldn't if you didn't do that too. At least you're able to sing the songs by over crying it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. I wrote out like a 10-point answer to him when he asked that question originally. And I love hearing your guys' perspective on it as well. I think that's going to add a whole lot to this conversation. Let's go ahead and make this a podcast. We're going long. I think this would be great. I'm on distortion, safety, and relaxation and stuff.
For sure. Well, I mean, I like that you went to the. I was thinking of because we're heading up into flu season and allergies and whatnot. I've already had a few students who are like, "Oh, my voice feels like crap." I myself, like, I'm dealing with allergies, and so I like that we talked about recovery and just talked about vocal health a little bit, because I think there's a lot of value in that right now, just because that's what people are going to be dealing with.
So many singers have post-nasal drip and allergies, and if you want to keep your voice healthy, you've got to be a lot more careful with it.
Yeah.
If you're already dealing with external factors that are affecting your voice, pamper yourself more. Take extra time to warm up. Take extra time to cool down, something a lot of people forget to do, because it allows your voice to stay healthy. Take extra time to figure out, how do I sing that a little bit more comfortable rather than just go all out for it, and still keep the energy up, like without having to go all out for it. Yeah, I think that's super important. I have asthma. I've been teaching for 10 years. I've been a professional musician for over 30 years. I have asthma, and it's been my career. I have to take extra precautions. When I'm on stage, or when my nerves are up, even if it's from excitement or from being actually nervous and have stage fright, which I still deal with a little bit, or when I'm just getting together with a good friend and it's all subconscious excitement, I start coughing a lot. That really affects me on stage. So I have to be extra careful. I prepare extra. I spend extra time with the steam inhaler. I spend extra time with my warm-up. And when I'm singing live, I'm like, okay, maybe I'll change a couple notes that were normally in the recording. At least they were really high. I'm going to avoid that a little bit. This is supposed to be super distorted here. Let me start out that way, see how it feels. And if it's too much, then I'll back off. Yeah, that's super important stuff. And I guarantee you, 90%, probably way more than that, of the recordings you listen to, that is not what they do live.
No, Definitely not.
So, yeah, listen to your favorite singers in live recordings.
Mhm.
Good, and I'm pulling numbers out of my ass here. I know, but I would say there's a number of them. I would say maybe 10 to 20% that don't even sing on key live, which is a lot. 20% is a lot. But I give them some grace because they may be on tour and not getting enough sleep, not eating quite right, having to sing night after night. I get it.
Yeah.
So a lot of them drop the key of the song.
Yep.
That's perfectly fine to do. A song that's normally in A, or the high note is the C or the D, is suddenly a step and a half lower. Yeah.
Yeah, and like that's okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's about
Or,
the show.
a lot of them change the melody. I think My Chemical Romance singing that
Welcome to Black Parade.
Black Parade.
Yeah.
Listen to him live. Most of the time, he drops the chorus an octave.
Yeah.
Lets the audience carry it. And
Yeah.
it's okay to do that. Avenged Sevenfold, which is really distorted and really high, and I rarely hear him sing the high notes. He does.
Mhm.
He does that live sometimes. Not the whole concert.
No. Well, and again, like that, going back to what the point I brought up earlier was, vocal capital. Like, you're on tour, you've got to make your voice last as long as it can, and you need to take precautions to make sure that it's not gonna go out on you, because canceling a show, you lose money. That money's gone, and you might lose some fans because of that, because it's not, loyal fans will understand, but some people might see that and be like, oh, okay, well, maybe I won't buy another ticket to see them, because who knows if they're going to cancel or something like that, which isn't I'm not supporting that kind of mentality. I think accepting that musicians are still people and we get sick or we're not going to sound as studio perfect as is people want us to, but still, like, there's a risk to canceling a show. Definitely paying attention to your voice and understanding that it's okay to make adjustments to make it work. It's better that we get a good show than if you're pushing yourself to make it as brutal as you think it should be. You got a lot. Let the guitar, let the heavy-handed drums, let and I mean that in like an awesome way, because it sounds brutal and awesome. Let that create that energy, and just sing. Just sing.
How many vocalists have you seen live that the guitarist does the screams and they do all the cleans?
Mm-hmm.
Or they trade off.
Mhm.
I definitely saw that with like Five Finger Death Punch. He would keep introducing new singers to every single song, like guest singers on every song when I saw them live. So he sang the first song and the last song. That was it.
Mhm.
Somebody else actually sang the entire song on every other song. And most of the time I've seen like videos of them live, he would scream a little, and then his guitarist would kind of take over for a little while, and then he would do it some more again. There are tricks to this, especially live. You don't have to take it all on yourself, and you definitely don't have to distort if it hurts. It's just going to make things worse for you.
Absolutely.
That said, I want to just one more thing with that is studio. So, and it's not much different than live, but it's different enough because you want that perfect take. You can't just drop the song a step and a half. You can't just sing it clean. So let's say you're distorting and trying to record these really distorted parts or screams, grit, whatever, in the studio. In general, over the past 30 years as a recording engineer, what I've seen is it takes about an hour per track to record a part. So an hour per song per track. Think of it that way. And it's not always that. Some people nail it in the first take. And then you have Michael Jackson took 120 takes. It's stuff like that. So if you keep in mind the average, you're going to go in, you're going to record the song. It's going to take you an hour to do this distorted part. And then you've got to layer it too. So there's another hour.
Yeah.
What do you do? What do you do to preserve your voice in that situation when you know you're going to be distorting for that 2.5 hours, like we talked about earlier, um, and you don't want to overdo it, but you still want an awesome take?
A lot of the times what I'll do is I like to record. Well, in my case, I record final takes as I'm writing, and you should take liberties with your producer and other bandmates to try things out. But you can start with doing things as an outline. Like I'll do this a lot with harmonies where I'll have my main part. And if I'm getting to harmonies, recording them lighter than you might do just to check pitch. Like, does this really work in the music? Does this work in the final recording, this melody, this harmony? And then you're warming up in a way to get used to those melodies. But if you already know them, know that trying and fitting them in as a producer will take a little bit of time. So you will do your takes and warm up into them. Obviously, maybe you do one clean and then you start adding distortion till you feel like you're getting closer to something, but let them mess with the take and don't be afraid to move on to another part and just be like, oh, this is easier for me right now. So I'm going to do this, get warmed up, build my confidence, let them do edits in between takes. So you have a little time to recover. Let them know that you need 5 minutes. They're okay with that. They want the best product for you, which ultimately takes them less time because if you're doing the right takes, they get paid sooner than you spending extra time there, overlapping session time, things like that. But just being able to know that you'll have little breaks in the recording process to recover, sketch and outline things to warm yourself up into melodies if you're changing things up, and just feel free to be creative and ask for input. Maybe the distorted part doesn't have to be so aggressive after the producers and the band hear it in a mix, and then just be okay to adjust and adapt things.
Yeah. And be okay with having somebody else do the scream. You know, that's,
Sure.
it's,
Yeah.
so now you have a guest screamer. Awesome.
Featuring. Yep.
Yeah.
You have anything to add, Matt?
Yeah, no, I mean, all I was going to add was my experience with that is I would go in and I would do a scratch take where I just do one take of the whole song and say, okay, that's there. And not saying like, okay, that's going to be like, that's there as a backup. But chances are, you know, if you're performing a song, you should be able to at least sing a good chunk of it in one take. Because if you're going to sing it live, like you should be able to get some parts of it down, right? So chances are in that scratch take, you have some good stuff that you're not going to need to go back and redo over and over and over to where you say like, okay, let's do the first verse. Okay, cool. I got that down. Let's do the chorus. Okay, cool. I got that down. Like go through the whole song, then listen and pick out the sections that, okay, I would like to do this a little differently. I would like to do this a little differently. But that way you're not looking at it from, you have to record, 10, 20 takes of each section to get the best one. You're doing one whole take and then just picking out the parts that you need to fix. That's how I personally go about it.
Like
I usually do
reverse
5
engineer it.
takes. 5 takes in total, where the first 3 are really I sing the song. It's normal. I just have fun with it and go for it.
Yep.
And the way I want it to be. And then the next take is I am singing it perfect. I even suggest practicing this way sometimes. I'm singing it perfect. I'm focused on technique. I want everything to be in exactly the right spot. And then the third time I go all out emotional. Like I don't care if it's off key. I don't care if that scream sounded terrible to me in the moment. It's a raw passion and emotion. And then I go back and do small sections to say, okay, do I need to change anything? Do I have good takes for this? If I'm unsure, okay, I'm going to do another take, maybe another couple takes of just that small part. And I go through the whole thing like that. And then I'll go through sometimes later and do some doubling screams or get creative because it was really hard to do. I haven't fully recovered. I got to get the song done. Okay, let me just copy and paste that scream and move it over a few samples. Like I'll move it over, 19 milliseconds, whatever, and now it's doubled. And sometimes you got to do that, and it's okay. It's okay. And I think a lot of what we talked about today is that permission to change it. You don't have to do it exactly right because you can still get the end result you want. And at a live show, the end result is that everybody had fun and thought it was awesome. In a recording, it's that, okay, you have captured that element that is awesome to you in some form. The end result is still what you wanted it to be. And that's super important. I would also say that in what you're talking about, Drew, and as far as switching it up to where there's clean, then there's distorted, or maybe if you're recording quite a few songs, you do a little bit of distortion every day, not try to do it all in one stint. The same can apply for live shows. So change up your set list. But there's things to consider here. You don't want all the hard songs at the beginning, and then your voice is worn out, and then you end up oversinging the rest of the set because you're worn out. So mix it up. Except do a hard song, do some easy songs, do another hard song, do some easy songs. Just mix it up like that. It's let your voice chill out in between the hard stuff. Recording or live. I think that's a very powerful way to go about it, in a way that'll keep you going rather than wearing you out.
100%.
And I think the consensus on oversinging is don't do it.
Don't do it, please.
If you do, please chill out for a while.
Yes.
Well, I think we had a lot to say on that. Is there, you want me to go over some more questions, or I think we answered like 20 different questions in what we talked about. So.
Yeah. I do got to get going. So this feels good.
Okay.
No, I like this. No, I think this is good.
Sweet. If anybody has any questions that's listening to this, please ask on our community. We're happy to help out. Happy to clarify more if we need to. Cool. Oh, thanks, guys. Now remember, if you want a place to discuss this topic further and other topics too, a place where you can improve both your voice and your music career with courses and other cool resources, unlockable resources even, in a community of other rock and metal singers on the same path. We'll support you, encourage you along the way, just a cool community to be with. Then join us at school.com/rock singing success. Now, over my last 30 years as a professional performing musician, music career coach, and rock singing coach, I've helped hundreds of in-person students and thousands of students in my courses. So I created the Rock Singing Success community to offer you even more help on your journey. Again, that's school.com/rock singing success. That's SKOOL.com/rock singing success. Join us there. Let's continue this discussion. See you there.